Welcome to session 217 of the Bible in a Year commentary. If you started this series on the 1st of January, then today should be the 5th of August. Today we'll be looking at Malachi 3 to 4 and Psalm 62. But so far in Malachi, we've read through the first three of God's back and forths with his people. Malachi is a prophet speaking to those who have returned from exile. The book is structured as a series of back and forths between God and his people. God would bring a claim, the people would then challenge this claim, and then God points to the truth of what he says. God told the people he loves them, but they doubted him, showing their lack of trust in God. He then pointed to the nation of Edom. God didn't choose Edom, and they went into exile like Israelites. But unlike the Israelites, they never returned from exile. The fact that God has redeemed the Jews from exile shows how much he loves them. God then challenged the people for polluting their worship. When the people asked how, he pointed to their subpar offerings, that they wouldn't even serve at their own table. The Levites had failed in their responsibilities and allowed the worship of the people to get to this state. Next up was an accusation that the people had given up on their covenants with God and with one another. The men had married foreign women, allowing their foreign worship to continue in the land. This then tempted the people away from God, breaking their covenant with him. But to make it worse, many of the men weren't even remaining faithful to the covenants they were making with their wives, abandoning them to chase after other women. Finally, God challenged the people for allowing evil people free rein. The people argue that it doesn't matter because God is okay with it, or that he doesn't even care about justice. But let's jump in with today's reading, Malachi 3 to 4. God responds to this claim from the people that he's not there or he celebrates those who do evil. He tells the people that he will come soon with his messenger. This messenger will go before God, preparing the way for him. But he warns them that they should be concerned. When he comes, it will be like a purifying fire, ready to burn up anything impure. It is when the people have been purified that they will begin to worship him properly. At that time, he will pass judgment on the wicked, those who practice magic, adulterers, liars, and those who oppress the poor and the marginalized, not fearing God. The warning there is, yes, God is coming, but you better make sure you're not one of those before he comes. Next, God tells his people to return to him. They ask him how, and he points out by not robbing him of what is rightfully his. The people had stopped giving their tithes, the 10% of their earnings that was to be used for the upkeep of the temple and the care of the poor. If the people will be faithful to him in this, then he will pour out blessings on them and make sure that their harvests never fail. Then comes the final back and forth. God accuses the people of speaking harshly about him. They ask how, and he points to how they've told others there's no value in following God. Those who do what they want are the happiest and prosper. While this is being said, there are some among the people who do fear God. God makes note of these people, and when he comes, he will save them, so that all will see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between those who serve and fear God and those who don't. Then God speaks of a future day, where there will be a fire that burns away all evildoers. But for those who fear God, it will be like the sun rising on a new dawn, bringing healing and restoration. No longer will they be oppressed by the wicked, but they will stand over them in victory. And this leads us to the conclusion, the core of what will lead the people back to God. God encourages these people to be faithful, remembering and obeying the teachings that he gave Moses and that have been passed down to them. These scriptures will guide them. And then in the future, God will send the prophet Elijah, whose mission will be to restore family relationships. This right relationship within family symbolizes the order and unity that comes with being in covenant with God. But this comes with a warning. If the people fail to listen to Elijah when he comes, God will strike the land with utter destruction. And then the book ends there. As mentioned, this is our final prophetic book of the Old Testament. It picks up the same themes that have run through most of the post-exilic books. God's blessing is dependent on the faithfulness of his people, but it has two more images that we may not have seen before. The first is a messenger that will prepare the way for God to return to his people. The second is that Elijah will return to restore relationships and bring things in line with God's order. Make a point of storing these away for later. You can add them to the growing collection of prophetic images we've gained throughout the prophets. Images like a future priest-king from the line of David, or a servant who will come and be pierced and suffer to redeem God's people. Images of a new Jerusalem, where God will destroy the wickedness and chaos of the world and all nations will come to worship him. But that is the book of Malachi and the last of the Old Testament prophets. Before we move on to the New Testament, it's probably worth having a recap of what we've read so far, and this is where the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles come in, which we'll start looking at tomorrow. But for now, let's look at Psalm 62. This psalm is attributed to King David, and at first glance it may look like a lament psalm, as the psalmist brings a complaint against the wicked. But one of the primary focuses of a lament psalm is that it starts with turning to God and bringing him the complaint. In this psalm, the psalmist only turns to God at the end. Instead, we should read the psalm as a trust or wisdom psalm. While the psalmist reflects on the wickedness of the world, they ultimately are confident that God will have his way. Here is a summary of the structure, but I would recommend checking out the written version of this commentary in the description to see the structure properly for yourself. But we start with verses 1 to 2, a declaration of trust, and then with verses 3 to 4, complaint against the wicked. Then we have verses 5 to 8, a declaration of trust, and then verses 9 to 10, a complaint against the wicked. And then we end with verses 11 to 12 with a declaration of trust. The psalmist starts with trust. They will wait patiently on God because in him is salvation. They then turn to the wickedness around them. The wicked continue to attack and beat others because of their position. They lie and deceive. And then the psalmist swings back to focusing on God. Again, they will wait patiently on God, because in him is salvation and security. The psalmist turns to others, encouraging them to trust in God as well. Then back to the complaint. Humanity is weak. It doesn't matter if you're important or not. The reality is, compared to all creation, they are no more than a breath. And there's no point putting trust in wealth as though that matters at all. Instead, all power and strength comes from God. God strengthens and blesses people because he is a loving and faithful God. He will strengthen and bless people based on their obedience and good works towards him. Thanks for joining us today. Take a moment to reflect on what you've read and share your thoughts or questions below. If you're watching in the future, then you can click here for the next session, or you can find the full playlist just down here. To receive these daily commentaries in your email inbox, subscribe via the link in the description below. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.